Congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you.
You are a friend. You are a man of integrity. You and I have worked closely together on this committee, on the Armed Services Committee, and I have every confidence you are going to make a superb Attorney General. You know, this has been an interesting day at this hearing, listening to Democratic senator after Democratic senator give speeches in praise of the rule of law. And I am heartened by that. I am encouraged by that. Because for 8 years it's been absent. For 8 years we've seen a Department of Justice consistently disregarding the rule of law. When Eric Holder's Department of Justice allowed illegal gun transactions, illegally sold guns to Mexican gun traffickers as part of Fast and Furious, guns that were later used to murder Border Patrol agent Brian Terry, the Democratic members of this committee were silent. When Eric Holder was found in contempt of Congress for refusing to cooperate with Congress's investigation into Fast and Furious, once again, the Democratic members of this committee were silent. When the IRS illegally targeted United States citizens for exercising their First Amendment views, for exercising their roles in the political process, Democratic members of this committee were silent. When the Department of Justice refused to fairly investigate the IRS targeting citizens and indeed assign the investigation to a liberal partisan Democrat who had given over $6,000 to President Obama and Democrats on this committee were silent. When numerous members of this committee called on the Attorney General to appoint a special prosecutor to ensure that justice was done in the IRS case, Democrats on this committee were silent. When the Justice Department began using Operation Choke Point to target law-abiding citizens that they disagreed with politically.
Senator Jeff Sessions, you are racist. You have ties to the KKK. You call the NRA to be an honorary organization. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter.
Jeff Sessions, Senator of the United States, you believe in self-deportation.
Black Lives Matter!
Senator Sessions does not respect the rights of African Americans, Muslims, or immigrants. Senator, do your job. Senator, do your job. Senator Sessions is a racist.
You know, free speech is a wonderful thing. When the Department of Justice used Operation Choke Point to target legal businesses because they disagreed politically with those businesses, the Democrats on this committee were silent. When the Obama Justice Department sent millions of dollars of taxpayer monies to sanctuary cities that were defying federal immigration law, the Democrats on this committee were silent. When the Obama administration refused to enforce federal immigration laws and unilaterally rewrote those laws, the Democrats on this committee were silent. When the Obama administration released tens of thousands of criminal illegal aliens, including rapists and murderers, into the general population, Democrats on this committee were silent. When the Department of Justice signed off on the Obama administration paying a nearly $2 billion ransom to Iran, contrary to federal law, the Democrats on this committee were silent. When the Obama administration ignored and rewrote provision after provision of Obamacare, contrary to the text of the law, the Democrats on this committee were silent. When the Obama administration signed off on illegal recess appointments that the Supreme Court had to strike down unanimously, the Democrats on this committee were silent. And when the Obama administration released 5 Guantanamo terrorists without the required notification of Congress, the Democrats on this committee were silent. That pattern has been dismaying for 8 years, but I take today as a moment of celebration. If once again this committee has a bipartisan commitment to rule of law, to following the law, that is a wonderful thing, and it is consistent with the tradition of this committee going back centuries. Now, if we were to play a game of tit for tat, if what was good for the goose were good for the gander, then a Republican Attorney General should be equally partisan, should disregard the law, should advance political preferences favored by the Republican Party. Senator Sessions, do you believe that would be appropriate for an Attorney General to do?
No, I do not. I believe you. And I think we do have to be aware that when something like this is done, and some of the things I'm familiar with enough to agree with you that I thought were improper, I do believe it has a corrosive effect on public confidence in the constitutional republic of which we are sworn to uphold.
I think you are exactly right. You and I are both alumni of the Department of Justice, and it has a long bipartisan tradition of staying outside of partisan politics, of simply and fairly enforcing the law. I will say right now, if I believed that you would implement policies, even policies I agreed with contrary to law, I would vote against your confirmation. And the reason I am so enthusiastically supporting your confirmation is I have every degree of confidence you will follow the law faithfully and honestly. And that is the first and most important obligation of the Attorney General. Now, earlier in this hearing, Senator Franken engaged you in a discussion that I think was intended to try to undermine your character and integrity. And in particular, Senator Franken suggested that you had somehow misrepresented your record. It is unfortunate to see members of this body impugn the integrity of a fellow senator with whom we have served for years. It is particularly unfortunate when that attack is not backed up by the facts. Senator Franken based his attack primarily on an op-ed written by an attorney, Gerald Hebert. There is an irony in relying on Mr. Hebert because, as you well know, in 1986, during your confirmation hearing, Mr. Hebert testified then and attacked you then, making false charges against you. And indeed, I would note in the 1986 hearing, 2 days later, Mr. Hebert was forced to recant his testimony, to say that he had given false testimony to this committee, and indeed to say, quote, "I apologize for any inconvenience caused Mr. Sessions or this committee by my prior testimony." So an individual who's testified falsely once before this committee, his op-ed is now the basis for Senator Franken's attack on you. And indeed, the basis of Senator Franken's attack is he claims you were uninvolved in several civil rights cases that were listed on your questionnaire. In 1986, Mr. Hebert testified, this is a quote from him, "I have needed Mr. Sessions' help in those cases, and he has provided that help every step of the way." Is that correct, that that's what Mr. Hebert testified?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, in the 4 cases Senator Franken referred to, you reported all 4 of them in your supplement to the Judiciary Committee. Is that right?
That is correct.
Mr. Franken didn't mention that. And let me point out, here's how you describe your involvement in your written submission to this committee. Quote, "For the cases described in 2, 4, 8, and 9, my role, like most U.S. attorneys in the nation and not with non-criminal civil rights cases, was to provide support for the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division's attorneys. I reviewed, supported, and co-signed complaints, motions, and other pleadings and briefs that were filed during my tenure as U.S. attorney. I provided assistance and guidance to the civil rights attorneys, had an open-door policy with them, and cooperated with them on these cases. For the cases described in 6, I supervised litigation and signed the pleadings." Now, that is consistent with the 1986 testimony that you provided help every step of the way. Is that correct?
Well, I think so, yes.
There's no question you've been forthright with this committee, and I would note that members of this committee don't have to search far and wide to know who Jeff Sessions is. We've known every day sitting at this bench alongside you. I want to shift to a different topic, and it's the topic I opened with, which is the politicization of the Department of Justice. The Office of Legal Counsel has a critical role of providing sound legal and constitutional advice, both to the Attorney General and the President. And in the last 8 years, we have seen a highly politicized OLC, an OLC that has given politically convenient rulings, whether on recess appointments, whether on executive amnesty. And early on, perhaps that was started by 2009 Attorney General Holder overruling OLC concerning legislation trying to grant the District of Columbia representation in Congress. And it may well be that that sent a message to OLC that its opinions were to be political and not legal in nature. Tell me, Senator Sessions, what will you do as Attorney General to restore professionalism and fidelity to law to the Office of Legal Counsel?
Senator Cruz, I think any short-term political agenda gains that come from the abuse of the lawmaking processes and requirements of the Department of Justice just don't make sense. It will always, in the long run, be more damaging than the short-term gain that one might have. The Office of Legal Counsel, all of us who've served in the department know, is a big-time position. You need a mature, smart, experienced person who understands this government, who understands the laws, and is principled and consistent in their application of the laws. That will help the president, it will help the Congress, and it will help the American people. I do believe we need to work hard to have that, and I will do my best to ensure we do have it.
One final question. In the last 8 years, the Department of Justice's Solicitor General's office has also, I believe, been unfortunately politicized, and it's sustained an unprecedented number of unanimous losses before the United States Supreme Court. Indeed, President Obama's Justice Department won less than half of its total cases before the Supreme Court, which is the lowest presidential win rate since Harry Truman. The average historically for the last 50 years has been about 70%. Numerous of those cases were unanimous, with indeed both Obama Supreme Court appointees voting against the lawless positions of this Justice Department, including their assertion that the government has the authority to supervise and direct the appointment and the hiring and firing of clergy in the church. What will you do as Attorney General to ensure the integrity of the Office of Solicitor General, that it is faithful to the law and not advancing extreme political positions like the Obama Justice Department did that have been rejected over and over again by the Supreme Court?
I think the problem there is a desire to achieve a result sometimes that overrides the commitment to the law. In the long run, this country will be stronger if we adhere to the law, even though somebody might be frustrated in the short term of not achieving an agenda. The Solicitor General should not advocate to alter the meaning of words to advance an agenda. That is an abuse of office, and I would try to seek to have a Solicitor General who is faithful to the Constitution, serves under the Constitution, does not feel it has the power to rise above it and make it say what it wants it to say.
Thank you, Senator Sessions. Congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you.
You are a friend. You are a man of integrity. You and I have worked closely together on this committee, on the Armed Services Committee, and I have every confidence you are going to make a superb Attorney General. You know, this has been an interesting day at this hearing, listening to Democratic senator after Democratic senator give speeches in praise of the rule of law. And I am heartened by that. I am encouraged by that. Because for 8 years it's been absent. For 8 years we've seen a Department of Justice consistently disregarding the rule of law, found in contempt of Congress for refusing to cooperate with Congress's investigation into Fast and Furious. Once again, the Democratic members of this committee were silent. When the IRS illegally targeted United States citizens for exercising the First Amendment views, for exercising their roles in the political. When Eric Holder's Department of Justice allowed illegal gun transactions, illegally sold guns to Mexican gun traffickers as part of Fast and Furious, guns that were later used to murder Border Patrol agent Brian Terry, the Democratic members of this committee were silent. When Eric Holder was fiscal process, Democratic members of this committee were silent. When the Department of Justice refused to fairly investigate the IRS targeting citizens and indeed assign the investigation to a liberal partisan Democrat who had given over $6,000 to President Obama and Democrats on this committee